Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Oh, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers post-game reaction show. Just got back from my couch because I was not at the game tonight. My son is in town for his spring break, so I'm spending some quality time with him. But I did watch the game. We watched the game. He was enjoying asking me different questions about basketball. So it's always nice when we get to watch games together. And hopefully he'll get to go to a game this week. I'm trying to arrange that. But the Lakers won 125-109 to improve to 42-25. They moved back up to number 4 in the Western Conference, with Memphis losing tonight. It was a crazy game in terms of the standings, where Denver and Golden State were playing one another. It was a win-win and a lose-lose for the Lakers. Denver ended up winning that game despite not having Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. But Houston won, Memphis lost, Minnesota lost, Lakers won. So they bumped back up to number 4. But before we get into tonight's show, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang: Michael, Braden, Rolla, Fernie, B0, Jonathan, Colby, Pieter, J Hoodie, Michael with the shout out, Chandler. Appreciate that, Chandler. I'll leave that one up. Chandler will like that again. People asking for the yo. Yeah, so for those asking, a little bit earlier, just because I was not at the game, but still writing tonight, still working tonight. So I'm gonna try and keep this one a little bit shorter, but we'll see. That never really works out for me. But shout out to everybody in the chat. I appreciate you all. Let's get into tonight's show. So overarching thought for me is back on track, and after a disappointing and, dare I say, disastrous road trip with LA going 0-4, dropping from number 2 to number 5, being in a little bit of a hole there, having LeBron suffer that groin injury, having Austin and Luka get more banged up, and just the heartbreak of the Denver game. That was something that JJ really talked about yesterday, was just getting over the Denver loss and how it felt like his group had their hearts ripped out in that one. Like, it was understandable coming off of a 4-game road trip at 9 days on the road and coming back for a matinee game that the Lakers would not have it against the Suns. They came out, they dominated the Suns in the first quarter, and they had an emphatic win. And tonight, a little bit of a slow start, right? They get down 9-2, then they respond with a 9-0 run, making 3 straight threes. But really, this game, the Lakers took control of it. I would say, by the first quarter, but certainly by the second quarter, and then things got a little shaky there, late third, early fourth. But anytime San Antonio went on a run, the Lakers responded with their own run. And I'm going to touch on Austin because I think he deserves to be highlighted tonight. But there was that 6-0 run to open the fourth quarter. Austin responds, actually turns the ball over, then gets it, does not give up on the play, immediately gets a steal, gets that layup, and then hits that 3. So he responds with a 5-0 run himself, and that steadies things for a bit there. And then he's part of that, feeding Gabe for that 3 to give the Lakers some more breathing room. Then he leaks out in transition, gets that layup that should have been an and 1. So some huge plays tonight from Austin from like a momentum perspective. And I thought he was really the calming force for the Lakers offensively. But just back on track. Like, this is, I think a lot of it has to do with being at home, and I think a lot of it has to do with having most of the group back outside of LeBron and Rui. But that's how it should be, right? Like, this is how this team, when close to full strength. Right now, they only have 7 of their top 9, and I'm going to be touching on that with one of my takeaways. They are back on track, and I don't want to overstate the impressive nature of tonight just because San Antonio is without their two best players. Wemby's out for the season. De'Aaron Fox is out for the season. But this is still a group that has given the Lakers some problems in terms of just their playing style and having a bunch of quick perimeter guys. And they beat the Lakers in LA back in January. And even tonight with the start, like it looked like it was potentially going to be a close game or a game that maybe San Antonio would upset them on the second night of a back-to-back. But the Lakers put that to rest quickly, and they controlled this game essentially from like the middle of the first quarter on. Notable performers tonight. Looking at the box score here, AR had 30 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 12 for 21 from the floor, 5 for 13 on threes, just 1 for 1 from the free throw line. And you could tell he was upset with some of the non-calls that he wasn't getting, but 2 steals for him as well. Only 2 turnovers. Lakers did a great job taking care of the ball. Luka nearly had his 3rd triple-double as a Laker, 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 14 assists. 3 steals, did a really good job playing the passing lanes. Also had a block. Just 5 for 20 shooting from Luka. Had an off night. Felt like his legs just weren't there. He airballed like a 4-footer, and several of his shots were very short, but made up for it by getting to the free throw line, 10 to 13 at the free throw line. DFS, after having his first double-digit scoring game in the Suns win in almost 2 weeks, follows that up with 15 points, hit 4 threes today. Jordan Goodwin, who just continues to impress, an all-around performance by him, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and a block. He has become an indispensable part of this roster, and he is going to be someone I touch on later in the show. Jackson Hayes, 9 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block. He continues to excel on both sides of the floor. And I thought San Antonio did a good job of really limiting him, but that opened things up for the perimeter, where San Antonio, you could tell they watched the Phoenix game and they were like, when Jackson Hayes screens, he is going to slip, he is going to roll, and he is going to cut to the basket with force, with verve. He is quick, he could jump, he has good hands, he is a large human, so we need to pay attention to that. So I thought Jackson drew in a lot of attention from the Spurs defense, and that allowed some of those weak side skips and just some of the blender actions that the Lakers were able to get into offensively. Gabe Vincent, 11 points, hit that big 3 late in the fourth quarter to help the Lakers get some separation. And then DK, 13 points off the bench. And I think, continues to, in general, I think be more involved offensively with off the dribble, pull up and pick and roll creation, which I think is a good thing for him longer term. And I think is actually more in line with his true skill set rather than him just simply being an off-ball movement shooter or catch and shoot guy, though he can obviously do that as well. And then takeaway number 1 for me is going to be Saucetin Reaves. And I could have gone with the I'm him. I do try to remember when I do a takeaway if I've made a similar one or use like the takeaway headline. So I think done the I'm him one with Austin. Like I think I said he's him at some point earlier in the season. So tonight it's Saucetin Reaves. I thought tonight he was a bit saucy, right? With some of the dribbling and just the flair that Austin plays with. I thought there was a little bit of extra of that tonight. But as I mentioned, hits some big shots and makes some big plays in the fourth quarter to keep right when it feels like San Antonio is getting to 13 points, 11 points in that danger zone of they hit a 3, all of a sudden it's single digits, and now the pressure is back on the Lakers. Felt like Austin always had the proper response. And this has been an incredible stretch from Austin here. 4 straight games with 28 plus points, including 2 games with 30 plus. And then in 3 of his past 4 games, 7 plus rebounds and 6 plus assists, including that 13 assist game. So in Denver. So Austin, I just think like I've talked about it. I talked about it yesterday, so I'm going to keep it relatively brief. But I just wanted to acknowledge, like tonight, I thought he was LA's driving force offensively. I think the defense has also been better. I think that's a part of his game that hasn't been credited enough in terms of his defensive improvement, where there was that lull for quite a while in the middle of the season. I think he has bounced back and really been a productive defender both on and off the ball. But it's just, again, I think his sense of the offense, picking his spots, playing off of Luka. JJ talked about after the game, running some more off-ball actions for both Luka and Austin. And the way that for Austin, it just creates some separation for him and gives him an advantage against whoever's guarding him. With Luka, it's more about getting him on the move. And if you give him you get him going downhill like off of a curl, all of a sudden the defense is panicking, and that's just opening up all this stuff. So, but with Austin, it was a lot of Luka having the ball and Austin being the weak side safety valve. So, but when Luka gets two to the ball, they're blitzing, they're trapping, they're doubling. He can hit Jackson as the short roller. But oftentimes there's a Spurs defender rotating over, shading over, shifting over to Jackson to try and intercept that pass because they know that pass is coming. And then that led to a lot of weak side opportunities for Austin, coming up to ball level or close to that to just catch it and rip. And that's where he can then go into a pick and roll. He can go into an ISO. He can pull up. Or depending on where he's stationed, he could just take the three there. So I think that the Lakers with it feels like because I got asked the question. I'm doing like an athletic Q&A, and it was like, is LeBron being out helping Luka get into a rhythm? And I don't agree with that. I think it's been. Because honestly, Luka's faced more doubling and blitzing without LeBron. But I think what it's actually done is it's kind of supercharged the Luka Austin partnership and like their two-man chemistry. And I think it's easy to have chemistry with Austin. I think it's easy to have chemistry with Luka. Both guys are high IQ basketball players, unselfish basketball players. So I think that there's a natural fit there. But I think not having LeBron in this instance has more supercharged like that relationship rather than unlocking Luka or necessarily unlocking Austin. I think part of it's been that they've gone against some easier defenses. Denver's a bad defense. Brooklyn's a bad defense. The Spurs are a bad defense. Phoenix is a bad defense. And then even Milwaukee is an above average defense, but they don't really have the perimeter personnel to contain them. So I think that's been part of this stretch here. But I think Luka and Austin have really started to figure out their chemistry and just the mind meld of those two together. And I think part of that's been Austin stepping up as that number two. And again, as we saw in Denver, that number one. But I just wanted to give Austin his flowers for the way that he's been playing recently. Really, he's been playing this way since like late November, and it's only gotten better. And he's been awesome. And he's really grown into a true number three who on any given night can step up and be a number two or a number one. And the list of guys that could do that in the NBA right now is a very short list. Takeaway number two is I'm officially cementing Jordan Goodwin as the Lakers' ninth man. And I don't think I'm late to the party because I've been on the Jordan Goodwin bandwagon. However, I've often talked about the Lakers in like the top eight, and it's the starters plus DFS plus Vando plus Gabe. And I think Jordan Goodwin officially belongs in that conversation with those guys. I think you can make a case like after DFS, healthy, he could arguably be the second most valuable bench player. I think he's in that conversation with Vando and with Gabe based on how he's been performing. And that sounds wild for a guy who didn't make his Lakers debut until right after the trade deadline, but he's been incredible and just awesome. And so one thing with Goodwin that I think is worth noting, and I had kind of forgotten this because of when he signed, there are different. So if you sign at the beginning of the season, a two-way contract, you have 50 games of eligibility of being active. But because of when Jordan signed, he actually only has 19 games of availability. And he just played his 14th game for the Lakers. So he only has 5 more games of eligibility left, and the Lakers have 15 games left. So when we've talked about Jordan Goodwin and the Lakers likely converting him at the end of the season. A big thing has been, well, from a financial perspective, it makes the most sense for the Lakers to just ride out the two-way contract till the end of the season, and on the final day, waive Cam Reddish, waive Alex Len, and sign Jordan Goodwin, and then sign one of the two-way bigs but between Jemison and Koloko. But I think Jordan Goodwin, especially, it seems like, and I'm going to touch on the injuries with the next takeaway, but it seems like LeBron and Rui are trending toward being back potentially by the end of this week. So they will be closer to whole sooner than later, it seems like. But I think Jordan Goodwin, with how important he's been to this group, I don't know if they could just say, like, let's play him the next 5 games and then let him sit 10 games and then sign him on like the final day of the regular season, or I guess maybe they sign him right before the final game and then he plays in like 6 of the final 15 games. I think he's too good. I think he's too important. And I think he's forcing the Lakers' hand here, where whatever the savings are, that's more of an Eric Pincus question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can try to find out. Whatever the savings are, it's not going to be that much compared to converting him after his two-way contract has exceeded its games. And I think it's pivotal for the Lakers to not overthink this and to not try to save money for the sake of, let's just survive without him these 2 weeks. Like, this dude has been playing some remarkable basketball. He has been excellent. He's been their best two-way find of the season. And this dude deserves to be on a 15-man roster, and he deserves to be on the Lakers 15-man roster. So there should be no overcomplicating or overthinking this. The second he has played his maximum amount of games, he should be converted. And that seems to be something that's going to happen sooner than later. Now, will that happen? I don't know yet. I had, again, kind of forgotten about the upcoming limit and him being that close. But now that I know he's 5 games away, I'm going to start to do some digging on that and see what I can report or just find out. But I think if I'm the Lakers, like, you got to sign this guy. You got to make him a 15-man roster player, and you can't wait. I just think that's a mistake with every game mattering and having the 0-4 road trip kind of setting you back a little bit in the West playoff race. Of course, like, ultimately health is more important than seeding, but this is a controllable factor that you could control whether this guy's on your roster. And I think it would be a mistake to just let him sit there for like 2 weeks not playing. Also from like a rhythm perspective and just like getting your playoff rotation, because you're already losing some reps right now, not having LeBron, not having Rui, having had some injuries recently. Like, you need your top 9, top 10, whatever you want to deem it, having as much continuity and lineup experience and just reps as possible going into the playoffs. So I think the second, and potentially 5 games from now, Jordan Goodwin needs to be converted, and the Lakers have to make that tough decision of are they waiving Alex Len or Cam Reddish, and just navigating that situation. But really, it should not be a tough decision, because Jordan Goodwin is this good. And tonight, I mentioned his stats already: 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 1 block. He has been just a menace defensively and really disruptive, whether it's against Vassell, Paul, Castle. He was switching on to different guys, but he's just like, he did a great job against Devin Booker, who's obviously one of the tougher covers in the league. Jordan Goodwin is just, he needs to be on the roster, and he needs to be on the roster as soon as fiscally possible. And then takeaway number 3, before we get into the Q&A here, injury update. And again, I'm considering maybe just making this its own section, but tonight I wanted to kind of go a little quicker before the Q&A. But the injury update off of tonight is that JJ said LeBron and Rui are unlikely to practice before they return, just because of the nature of the Lakers schedule. He said the Lakers' next practice probably won't be until April, where this is March 17th, St. Paddy's Day. April is 2 weeks away. So make of that what you will, which is the Lakers schedule right now. And he said that Rui is doing 3-on-3, which I think is an encouraging sign, a sign that maybe he could be back I don't know if Denver is realistic, but maybe the second night against Milwaukee, or seems to be trending toward at the latest, maybe Saturday against Chicago. So that's a positive development on the injury front with Rui. And I don't think you make too much about like they're not going to necessarily practice before they return. Like I think LeBron has played 22 years. Like LeBron misses a game or a stretch of games and he comes back and looks like himself. He's one of like the best bounce back guys where a lot of players, most players, frankly, need a little bit of a period to reacclimate and adjust. Not LeBron. Rui might need some of that, but I think the Lakers have enough forward depth where like he'll go back to starting most likely. And I think even if it takes him a couple games to get his legs back, and just like his rhythm and stuff, it's not a big deal. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. Comedian Jordan Haywood, how much Goodwin command on the open market this season? Well, the Lakers can prevent him from going to the open market. And I think that would be wise of them. I think they should sign him to a multi-year deal, which they can do. And so if I'm the Lakers, I sign him to like a 3 or 4 year deal and just get him as cheaply as possible. It would be a vet minimum contract. And maybe for him, you give him like an option after like the second year or something, or maybe, sometimes these things are like, depends on how much leverage a player has. I think Jordan Goodwin is playing his way into leverage. So maybe he gets a fully guaranteed 3 or 4 year deal or 3+1, something like that. But I would try to sign him for as long as possible just because he's only, he's a 4-year veteran. He's still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. So I would try to sign him to a team friendly contract for as much as possible. Now, of course, it's up to him whether he wants to sign that. But as a guy who's bounced around a bit in the league, I think he's going to have interest in just taking the guaranteed money, barring a team. You can always kind of send those feelers out or those kind of, back channel conversations. Maybe that happens. But I think more likely than not, he just signs a multi-year deal with the Lakers. Mitch Potter, LAL were +8 in turnovers and +7 in steals. So that's actually a good, I'm going to retroactively add in something. So I've touched on the turnovers recently. So another great night, only 9 turnovers. But I am going to touch on stat of the night retroactively is the 48 3-point attempts. And more specifically, according to JJ, 34 of those were uncontested. And I thought, again, this is a credit to Jackson, but it's also a credit to Luka and Austin and then the players making the shots. But with the attention that Jackson drew as a roller, I think that created a lot of uncontested looks for the Lakers and also the ball movement and the reads from Luka and Austin. So a late, belated stat of the night, but I'm thank you for reminding me of stat of the night. I don't know why I didn't write it down, but stat of the night is the Lakers move back up to 4. That's also part of tonight's relevant numbers. Samir Dude, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, is Luka hurt or is he still struggling with his shot? He's still impacting winning, but it is clear his shot is not all the way back. He is hurt. He talked about yesterday banging his knee and re-aggravating that. So I think that clearly his like lower body is not in the best place in terms of, just like I think he's got the ankle and the calf that he's, I don't think he's like 100% back from the calf necessarily. And then a knee. So like he's pretty banged up with his lower body. And I think you've seen that affect his rhythm and his burst and whatnot. But to your point, he's still impacting winning, and that's all you can really ask. I also think like we have to remember they're doing this without LeBron and Rui. Their number 1B option offensively and their number 4 option offensively. And I think those two guys will make things easier on Luka, on Austin. And so that's kind of another thing here. So he's had to play some heavy minutes. He's had to shoulder a bigger load offensively. And I think also coming off the road trip, and like it was a second night of a back-to-back. In the fourth game they played in 5 nights. So if you think about that, like that's like most of the guys, or not most of the guys, but with some of the guys, I think you could tell their shot was off a bit tonight, and Luka was certainly one of them. But I thought he made up for it by getting to the free throw line, and that's one of the good things with him, is that he can impact winning in so many ways. And like even when his shot's not falling, he's still so dangerous that he could then shift things and be like, okay, I'm going to play more in the post. I'm going to play more of a ground game. I'm going to play more like up faking and using my basketball IQ, my guile, my craft to get guys up, draw fouls, get to the free throw line, and get in a rhythm that way. So I'm not worried about it. I think, of course, like you would like to see him not be as hampered with his lower body stuff, but that just might be something that he just has to deal with moving forward. At this point in the season, most guys are banged up to some extent. But yeah, the shot is still a work in progress, but we're talking about a guy who's entering this game, had scored 30 or more points in 5 of his last 6. So I'm not really worried about Luka. And like, again, 4th game in 5 nights. I think for him in particular, it seemed like he felt it a lot tonight. And I think part of it was just some of the lower body stuff he's dealing with. Anthony Arredondo, thank you for the super chat. What are your thoughts on teams forcing the Lakers to shoot threes in the playoffs? Can the Lakers win with teams enforcing the strategy? I think this is the way I would guard the Lakers. If I was an opponent, I would... Like, I thought San Antonio had a pretty good strategy tonight. I don't think they had the personnel to enforce the strategy. I also don't think I don't think they had the personnel defensively, but I also don't think they had the personnel offensively, where I think with the Lakers, like, I think the teams that are going to give them the most problems are the teams who can wall off the paint to some extent, also kind of keep LeBron and Luka and Austin like relatively in check. Like those guys are going to go off and get theirs to some extent. But like if you can make things at least a little difficult on them and then prevent some of the easy stuff with the back cuts for Rui or the rim runs for Jackson, and if you can really compact the paint and then force them to be a jump shooting catch and shoot team, I think there will certainly be nights where the Lakers make 18, 19, 20, maybe even more threes. There will also be some nights where they struggle. Like I think one current limitation with this group is that I don't think they're a consistent shooting team. I think they've consistently been getting shots up, but I think night to night, there's an element of variance with this group where they're not like one of the elite shooting teams in terms of like comparing them to like a Boston or, some team like Cleveland, like teams in that kind of tier. I think OKC is kind of more middle of the pack with their shooting as well. So that I guess that bodes well for that matchup. But I would much rather force the Lakers to be a 3-point shooting team than a team that gets 65 points in the paint and 30 free throws, because it's not just that paint points. I think part of it is the Lakers can overload you in the paint and also get to the free throw line a bunch. And if you can wall that off and really load up the paint and be disciplined in that, I think it then just becomes a numbers game of like, are they making the shots? And they have not been making those shots recently. They did make them tonight, but that would be how I would approach the defending the Lakers. Can they win with teams enforcing the strategy? I think so, because especially in the playoffs, like that, there are going to be counters to that. I think having LeBron, having Rui, there are different ways to place those guys. I think it's also different. This is where I would like to see a little bit more LeBron Luka pick and roll, because if you can get LeBron as the short roll guy, it's harder to do if you have two like-sized defenders who are just going to switch it. But if you somehow have a big on LeBron, which we have seen some teams put centers on LeBron and almost dare him to shoot, if you can have, in those instances, I would like to see LeBron screen more for Luka, bring that center into the mix. He is probably not going to switch onto Luka, so he's going to either blitz or double or at least like soft hedge. And then that gives you an opening for LeBron to slip or roll and then hit him with a short roll pass. Or if you have kind of similar to tonight, Austin relocating up, then Luka hits Austin with the reversal pass. And then there was one play I'm thinking of where it was kind of like that, ping, ping. And then Jackson hits, I think it was DFS on the weak side for an open three. And if you have LeBron in that spot and it's Austin hitting LeBron, then he can take a scrambling defense off the dribble, get to the rim or driving kick or just hit the weak side guy, quickly. So I think that's probably the best strategy, is just like packing the paint and making their role players like DFS. And I mean, Rui is, there's some guys you don't want shooting like Rui, and I don't want DFS shooting if I'm a defense either, but like, I think Gabe, Goodwin, Vando, those are probably the three guys I want to try to force to beat me. DFS can be, he's been pretty up and down lately with his shooting, though it seems to be rebounding. And then Dalton and Rui, I don't want those guys to get hot or open. So I think there is a case-by-case basis in terms of like how I would approach that. But I think that's probably your best bet, because if you let the Lakers get downhill and in the paint, they're scoring or they're getting to the free throw line. Like we've seen that this team lives in the paint, and they are one of the best finishing teams in the league and one of the best foul drawing teams in the league. So if I'm in defense, I'm trying to wall that off. It's just much easier said than done. I thought San Antonio started the game off with a good strategy again. I just think they're a little too small, and they didn't put the pressure on the Lakers offensively, which is another element, again, of like, you need to score with them, make them play defense. And if you can kind of tire them out, the shots start to not fall as much. And then, it becomes like, then maybe Luka and LeBron try to do more on their own or whatnot. But again, easier said than done. And I think the Lakers defense at this point is so good that, like, even if you are slowing them down a little bit, they're probably slowing you down more. Hey, Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Do you think AR should be in the MIP conversation? I talked about this yesterday. I think so. I think Cade's going to win it for whatever that's worth. And I think Austin's kind of just been overshadowed by, like, JJ's getting some Coach of the Year buzz. Luka's obviously the headliner with everything since the trade. LeBron, year 40, or obviously age 40, year 22, seeming to be an all NBA guy if he could come back in time, which it seems like he will. So sometimes it feels like Austin's like the fourth guy in that conversation, and that causes him to be overlooked a little bit. But I think so. Like, I think he should be on ballots. Him versus Cade, not even comparing, obviously, like, Cade's the better player, but more so in terms of like growth, and like Cade is a former #1 pick. Austin's a former undrafted player. Like the expectations for those two guys are different, but yeah, he should be on a lot of ballots. I do think Cade, with the season he's having, potentially an all NBA second team guy, and also leading Detroit to the playoffs, I think he's probably going to get it. And I think it's hard to quibble with that. But Austin deserves to be in the conversation. And if you want to put him number 2, number 3, like, I'm good with that. Britton, thank you for the super chat. Who do you think will be our toughest challenge in the playoffs? I personally think OKC. If so, how would you game plan against them with our personnel? I think it's OKC. I know that there's this sentiment around the league, and I'm sure if you pulled players in the Lakers locker room, they probably feel the same, of like, people just aren't afraid of OKC. And I don't know if it's because of they haven't done it before outside of last year and going to the second round, or they do the like college style group post-game interviews with the RSN there. And like they kind of have this like young college, fresh out of fresh, like early 20s vibe to them, that maybe it's just like, I feel like people kind of just don't take them as seriously as maybe they should be. But I think it's hard to make a case for anybody else, honestly, just because I think the Lakers match up well with basically the entire West. So I think Denver, that seems to be a much better, like trending toward being a much better matchup for the Lakers. Golden State, we haven't seen like this version with Jimmy, but LeBron has historically, especially more recently, the last few years, like dominated Golden State and really revels in that matchup. And like Draymond, I don't think is as effective guarding him as he used to be. And I just think LeBron is going to overpower and dominate, to say nothing of what Luka will do. Austin has also played well in those matchups. And I think that they've really, even going back to like Dart, like I feel like they've had a good game plan for Steph. So I think that's going to be something that I would pick the Lakers, as I've said. Houston could be a tough matchup with their defense and their athleticism and their length on the perimeter. I just think their half court offense is a bit of a mess, and I don't trust it in big games. Memphis is a wild card, but I also kind of view them as like maybe a better version of Houston, where I like their top end weapons are better with Ja and Triple J. I just think kind of similar to Golden State, that the Lakers have figured out some things in those matchups. And I feel like that's translated across now multiple seasons, two coaching staffs. Then it's, yeah, I mean, Minnesota, that could be a tough one, but I don't think they can. The offense with them is a bit clunky. I know they've been playing better recently. They just had their win streak snapped. So really, I just come back to OKC as being like the best team in the conference all season. I think they should be the favorite to come out of the West, and they're going to win 65 games and have a historic season. So I think OKC is going to be the biggest challenge for the Lakers, whether that's in the second round or potentially the conference finals. And in terms of how I would go about that, the starting matchup matchups are a little tough, because like, I guess you're putting Austin on Shea. You're not putting Rui on Shea. You're not putting Luka on Shea. I think LeBron can guard Shea in like crunch time if he's like switched on to him. But I think Austin probably has to take that primary assignment. I would assume that Rui gets the J-Dub matchup. I would assume that Luka gets the Lou Dort matchup. And I don't think that they haven't been starting the double big look. I'm going to pull up their rotation. They have been, but J-Dub's out. But I mean, if they go double big against the Lakers, like I guess I'd want to know what Lou Dort's out, J-Dub's out. I guess I would go LeBron on Chet and Jackson on Hartenstein. Maybe you flip that, but that's a lot on LeBron to wrestle Hartenstein. The two big look is a little tricky because it's different than Denver's two big look, because Chet can just space the floor, and then both guys are much better rim protectors than Jokic and Gordon. And that's just they're just a really good defense. They kind of remind me, some people have compared them to the 2020 Lakers defense. I don't think they have the defensive depth that the Lakers had, where that group could go like 10, 11 deep with just quality defenders, but they do have a lot of quality defenders in their top 8, top 9. They're a tough one. Like I would like to see a game. I always kind of say that's my default stance. But I think what with Shea, you put Austin on him to start, and then you're going to rotate DFS and Vando and Gabe and maybe Goodwin. Like you're going to throw your bench guys at him. You really have to game plan for the free throw hunting, right? It's no secret. Shea is going to, he's crafty. He's got the head fakes. He's got the footwork. I think if you can limit him to like single digit free throws, that's like a win for your defense. And then I think testing Chet and J-Dub as like some of the role players I think you want to leave open and force into some shooting. But they have guys like an Isaiah Joe, and Aaron Wiggins, Kason Wallace. Like they have guys that can get hot and swing a quarter, swing a game. So like, I think they're really good. They also kind of profile as I think a team that could give the Lakers some issues with the front court, double big looks, but also they have some quick perimeter guys that could get out in transition, attack closeouts, all that stuff. So I think they have clearly have a speed advantage over the Lakers. I think one thing in the Lakers' advantage is like they've not been a good 3-point shooting team for the most part. So I think this could be a team where the Lakers pack the paint a bit and really focus on Shea and also focus on the defensive glass. That's probably how I would do it. Offensively, I think the key here is going to be, yes, Lou Dort and Alex Caruso are all defense caliber defenders and two of the best perimeter defenders in the league. I just think they're too short and too small to defend Luka and LeBron. So I think you want to hammer post ups and ISOs around the elbow in the mid post with Luka and LeBron and really focus on your reads out of that, because I think if those guys are hitting, scoring in the post, hitting their turnaround jumpers, that's going to unlock so much, because I think OKC is going to have to help, and that's going to lead to 4-on-3 opportunities or reversals and weak side reads. So I would say picking at, I think with Hartenstein and Chet in there, that there is going to be a certain level of size and rim deterrence and defensive rebounding and rim protection. But I think LA is going to have some size advantages over their perimeter guys that they can leverage. And it might be, again, if there are situations where maybe they put a Hartenstein or a Chet on LeBron, you either let LeBron cook those guys, or you run the 2-man game with LeBron and Luka, or LeBron and Austin, and you get those guys, or try to get those guys switched on to those guys to then create a blender opportunity, or LeBron as the short roller. So those are my initial thoughts. I would ideally like to see these two teams match up at close to full strength and have a better breakdown of that. But it is something that's on my mind, and I think that is going to be the biggest challenge for LA. Rich, thank you for the super chat. How much for Hayes next season? He fits Luka. This has been something I talked about a little bit yesterday. I would say I think Jackson's playing his way potentially into a non-taxpayer MLE range, which would be somewhere in the like $10 to $13 million range per year. I think it is partly going to come down to how he holds up. I don't even think like rest of the season, because I think he will hold up the rest of the regular season. But like, how does he hold up in the playoffs? If they play OKC in a 7-game series, how does he look against Chet? How does he look against Hartenstein? And if he doesn't fare well, I don't think it's like sayonara, goodbye. But I think it does raise some questions of just like, okay, is this actually the center of the future, or is he maybe punching above his weight a little bit in the regular season, and like he's a really, really good backup, but we want a different center? Or maybe he's like the placeholder starter, but then we need to add a certain caliber of backup, so it could be almost more like matchup based of, you have Jackson as one option, small ball is another option, and then this center X as another option. So I think it's too early to really give it, like, I will say, when teams are making their decisions on roster building, if we're looking at like how they weigh things, the playoffs are typically 50+% of like how a player is viewed. That is partly why, for some of the Lakers players to start this season, like Gabe kind of having the finish that he had, D'Lo having the finish that he had, Rui having the finish that he had, like those guys did not enter the season with trade value. And Rui, of course, is really upped his value and outperformed his contract. So has Hayes. But how you finish in the playoffs and how you look, like that is the lasting image, and teams weigh playoff performance more than regular season performance. We've seen it the other way, where like going back to like Jerome James with that little run that he had with Seattle, and then he got paid by New York. And it's like, that's like, sometimes it could work the opposite way, where you get a bag because of the playoffs. So I think with Jackson, it is partly going to come down to how does he fare in the postseason, and like, if they are playing Denver and it's Jokic and Gordon, or they're playing OKC and it's Hartenstein and Holmgren, how does he look against the best bigs in the West? Because those teams aren't going anywhere. Denver's going to have Jokic and Gordon next season. OKC is going to have Chet and Hartenstein next season. And if he gets eaten alive inside, then it's like, okay, well, again, doesn't mean he's not on the roster next year, but it maybe changes that calculation. But I think for now, he is looking like the likely starting center for next season, and he's probably going to command a double-digit annual value salary, which is just not something that I anticipated, and I don't think many people did. Bronny Van Exel, does the team discipline ejections like Coach Carter? No, not to my knowledge. It's a good question. It's not something I ever really ask, but to my knowledge, no. And I think like they won the game. I think JJ, that's not really like his style to do something like that. So I would be pretty surprised. Deity, thank you for the super chat. Do you think LeBron wanting out was a real worry when the Luka trade happened? Lots of people thought he was blindsided and would leave. I want to be careful how I answer this one. I would say I don't know how much of a worry it was at like the top level of the organization in terms of like the Genie Rob level, but I know in talking to lower level people, there in the just immediate aftermath of the trade and the situation, there was a sense of like, there's no way LeBron knew, and doing a trade of this magnitude and not giving him the heads up. Like he's always, I mean, he's been the guy since he entered the league, and it's not been like every team or every season he's been with a team like they run everything by him necessarily, but kind of similar to the Lakers running by the center options to Luka and being like, hey, would you be interested in a Mark Williams? I think there's a sense of like with LeBron that there's, especially a big move like that, trading AD, remaking the franchise, like that there would be some sense of giving him a heads up. And the fact that there wasn't, and his impending contract situation, and like Clutch theoretically losing some power with AD getting traded, like that would potentially lead to him asking out or at least exploring that option. Obviously that did not happen. So I think that shows sometimes like people have a visceral reaction or prediction to something, and then it does not happen. And we'll see this summer what in terms of his contract, and if he's willing to take a pay cut to improve the roster, and like what happens with all of that. But I know from talking to some people around the situation, that was an initial fear, but really within like the first 24 hours that got snuffed out, and it was clear that LeBron was going to be staying. He had, I believe it was Chris Haynes who reported that LeBron was not going to ask out, and that was in like the 24 to 48 hour window. I don't really remember because that night I slept like 2 hours, and then, you know, basically what was on a bender in terms of podcasting, live streaming, writing, doing radio hits, TV hits. It was just traveling back from New York to LA. It was a crazy couple days there. But in remembering it, there certainly was some concern from people around the organization at that time, but it was quickly disproven. So, yeah. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Do you think Vando's frustrated for lack of minutes? I think part of it's just been being careful with his minutes. He played 15 minutes tonight. I mean, I still think the Lakers don't really want to play him more than low 20s. I think that's like his general limit. So I mean, on some level, I'm sure like most players are frustrated. Like unless you're playing mid 30s or above, most guys are like on some level kind of frustrated with their minutes. I would say maybe like the back end guys who are back, like I guess anyone in the middle is kind of frustrated. It thinks they should be starting, that they should be playing 30 plus minutes. Like I think that's a common thought among most NBA role players. I think the key is, and I've talked about this a lot, where like I covered the 2019-20 Clippers, and I think the biggest issue with that group was you had these role play, like if you were ranking role players in terms of ego, they had Pat Bev, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell. Those are three role players with three of the biggest egos in the league, and partly deserved, but also I think that they all kind of viewed themselves in a better light than they actually were. And then you bring in Kawhi and PG, and that's where you start to get the clashing of like the preferential treatment and why is this guy getting this, and like I deserve this, and like or when I was the guy I wasn't getting this or whatever. So that can cause some internal friction. I think that the key, and I think the Lakers have this, is like even if there is that like human desire to want to play more, to want to do more, to think you deserve that, I think having guys who are willing to buy into the coaching staff's vision and accept their role. And I also give JJ a lot of credit with this. I think he's done a good job of like he calls it touching players, and he talks about like constantly touching players almost on a daily basis in terms of letting them know like what he's thinking about their game, where they're at in terms of the rotation and minutes and their role and like their performance and all that stuff. And like JJ's constantly basically checking in with them. And I think that constant communication with the guys keeps everybody relatively on the same page. And that's why you see the level of buy-in, and also letting them know that, hey, you always have to be ready, because the second a guy misses or goes down or something, like we're going to count on you. And we've seen several guys step up recently in those shorthanded situations. So I think with Vando, I'm sure on some level he'd want to be playing in the mid to high 20s, but I think right now the Lakers are being a little bit cautious with that. I also think I think teams have started to shift kind of back to how they defended him before, and I think LA can work on using, like they did run some horns tonight, and he got that one dunk off of like a curl screen on the right side, I want to say, but I think that's been a little bit of a limitation there too. But I mean, yeah, I think for now it's not really like a big thing in terms of like I think he's gonna be fine. Braden, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, games like today are always fun. Stu mentioned when Luka's shot's not falling, he still impacts the game, just like how Kobe did when he didn't have it going. He would rebound, feed Pau, etc. 100%. And that's what Luka did tonight. He got to the free throw line. He had 14 assists. As JJ said after the game, he could have had 18 or 19 if more guys made shots. And low turnover game for him, only 3. You take the 14 assists to 3 turnovers, 9 rebounds, 3 steals. Lakers were plus 19 in his 34 minutes. Like, again, I know 5 of 20 shooting, 1 of 7 on threes. I know is not good. He did not have a good shooting night. And again, he airballed a 4-footer. He had several shots very short, but the Lakers won. This game was never really in doubt. And 4th game in 5 nights. I just want to keep hammering that drum of, I think especially for Luka dealing with multiple lower body injuries right now, there was going to be some rust and just lack of energy and legs with that. And again, even with that, this dude basically had a 20, 10, and 15 triple double. So he finds other ways to impact the game. Tom Zayas, thank you for the super chat, friend of the show. Sup, Jovan. Curious what you think LA can do when healthy to get Austin more chances to get going like he has the last few games. Should they stagger he and Luka more? It's a good question. I think they should stagger he and Luka more. I mean, I think in general, staggering LeBron, Luka, and Austin ideally you have two of those guys on the floor, and I think that's how it's going to be come playoff time. But I think in a way, like Austin, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but like I think he's really feasted on the weak side being the safety valve, the weak side reversals. He has excelled in making plays out of those. He has also excelled running the show himself, as we saw in Denver, but also when he gets his shifts of when he's the primary offensive guy. I mean, he's got great chemistry with LeBron, and pre-LeBron injury, they were staggering it a bit where Luka had his unit, LeBron had his unit, and then LeBron and Austin had their unit together. And then, of course, they would combine the three and go with like the starters to start the game, but also sometimes to close like the halves or close games. So I think they kind of have their little rotation there with that. And I think it's largely worked. But what I would like to see, and this is as an aside, but it's really my only nitpick of the rotation, and part of it at times has been injury induced, so I get it. I don't love the Banshees plus like LeBron or Luka. I think that is putting too much on that player to create offensively, and unless that lineup is like crushing it defensively, which they are capable of doing, but like more so crushing it in the sense of like generating turnovers and chaos, which again, they can do, they have done, but they don't always do it. And then when they don't do it, I think that's when that group really struggles to score. And then sometimes they give up or they kind of tread water with like a lesser bench opposing lineup. So that's one thing I would like to kind of see just snuffed out moving forward, is like, ideally, I think you have two of LeBron, Luka, Austin, Rui on the floor at all times, even in the regular season. I like you need that second scoring option. And then if you are going to go a little bit more Banshee heavy with a DFS, a Vando, a Goodwin, something like that, I think maybe Dalton is the guy you throw in there, is just kind of like the shooter who could also get hot and create a little bit with some secondary stuff. But in terms of I think with Austin, it's tricky when LeBron is playing to some extent because he just clearly becomes the number 3 guy. So I think just breaking up that trio a little bit, but it's also like, it's a good problem to have. I think they also need their reps together to kind of figure things out. But I think Austin has benefited obviously from just, I think he's more benefited than Luka has from LeBron not being here, just because he gets the ball more, and Austin is good with the ball in his hands. It's just there's a limit to that when LeBron is healthy. So I think they can stagger, but I still think that they're in like discovery mode with what this all ultimately looks like. And I have really liked how Austin and Luka look together. So I think JJ's done a pretty good job with the rotation for the most part. But I would say that the one thing I'd like to see less of is like just 4 non-offensive players with Luka and LeBron. My AirPods are dying, so I'm going to take them out. Let me make sure my sound is still good. All right. Jerry Soriano, your lender for life. Again, the best advertising in the business. Thank you for the super chat. Of course, JHS is balling in Philly. LA lights too hot. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm happy for JHS. I obviously did not work out for him in LA, and you know, it is what it is. But I hope he's successful elsewhere, and honestly seems to be a guy who probably needed not as bright of lights. So I'm happy for him. I think it's a good thing for him. But obviously for the Lakers, it's a little bittersweet because they wanted him to do that with them. Rich, thank you for the super chat. When did players check out on Darvin Ham from your knowledge? Well, you came to the right spot because I had a big report last season. I believe it was January 5th or 4th. I think it was the 5th, with Shams back when he was at The Athletic, and really one of the things that a big thing within it was that clunky 4-wing lineup of LeBron, AD, Cam, Torian, Vando. And that was benching Austin, D'Lo, and Rui, who all started, and were big pieces of the Lakers going to the conference finals. They also were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest paid players on the roster. They were 3 guys who the team was looking at as like being part of their core at the time, and all guys who were just re-signed a few months earlier. And then Rui is buried in the bench behind Tori. And I think I think I mentioned Cam in there, but it was LeBron, Vando, Cam, Tori, and AD. So you had Cam and Vando, who are non-shooters, Cam, Vando, and Prince, who are non-ball handlers in like a real like secondary ball handling playmaking way. So that group, remember they gave up like the 11-0 run to Boston, I want to say, on Christmas. They ended up going, I think, 1-2 together I think there was one game where Rui started, but that was kind of a point where I think there was a sense in the locker room of there's being like some galaxy braining with things, and like at the time it was you could argue Austin versus D'Lo in terms of like who's the 3rd best player, but regardless of who you felt, both of the candidates for 3rd best player were coming off the bench. And it just was like, what's going on here? Like, why are we not playing our best players? And I think there was also a sense of like some favoritism of Darvin had been clear about his relationship with Torian in Atlanta. He had also constantly referenced this Milwaukee Atlanta Eastern Conference Finals game from 2021. I think it was like game 4, game 5, where like Cam had a good game and Darvin like held on to that for over 2 years. And so I think there was some politics and just, so it started in December, and then I think early January, that's when they dropped multiple games. They had the Memphis loss, the Miami loss. He had the can't live and die with every game. He also had the one tie where he tried to make the case that like the Lakers not having Gabe Vincent was worse than Miami not having Jimmy Butler, which just didn't make sense. Like there's just some questionable comments that he was making in the media. He was also not taking accountability for some of those losses. And it would either be like some excuses or kind of passive aggressive barbs at certain players. And just the locker room was not messing with it. So I wouldn't say they were fully out by early January, but it was like starting to get there. They righted the ship, and then I think once they got to the Denver series, most of the locker room felt they were unprepared and that they just kept doing the same stuff against Denver and losing in the same way. And I think that's ultimately when you saw AD take the shot that he took publicly at Darvin. And then Darvin, I get why he didn't want to, like, he was fighting for his job at that point, but it was like by kind of pushing back against AD, he was almost like proving everything that the locker room had felt against him. So that I would say that the kind of like mid-December, like post IST, when they started that skid. Another big one that I should throw in here, the Dallas game, actually at Dallas. This is post IST. It was the Dante Exum game. I think he hit 6 or 7 threes, and the scouting report was ignore Dante Exum, and he kept making threes, and players wanted to shift over and like contest him. And the game plan was not to do that. And then after the game, you had several players chirping about like, well, the game plan was to ignore him. And like, you could tell they were taking some shots at the defensive strategy. So I think it really started mid-December. Then it bubbled up a lot in early January. That's when we had our report. And then it kind of died down a bit because I think winning cures a lot of things. But then certainly once they got to the playoffs, it popped up again where it was just like, we don't have confidence in our coaching staff. Britton, thank you for the super chat. How much do you think DFS is worth if he opts out? It's a good question. I think it's kind of tough to say because the market is weird right now, where it's like if if you're an in-between player, which I think DFS is, you could potentially get squeezed. I think there's a bunch of teams that would easily sign him at the non-taxpayer MLE, which makes me think his market's above that. Obviously, he's currently making 15, 16 million. So I could see like high. I think he's been really good. I know the shooting there's been some shooting struggles recently, but in terms of, I think it was NBA University just had a tweet about like his rim protection and his rim protection numbers being really good. I think he's been like, the small ball numbers have all been great. Like the Lakers were trying, remember, go back pre-DFS trade, JJ was trying these like LeBron and Rui and like Dalton and D'Lo and Austin, or Max and Austin and D'Lo, Max, Austin, Gabe, some variation of that around LeBron and Rui. And those lineups were not performing well. And trading for DFS really unlocked the small ball group. Then they got Vando back late January. Then they ultimately trade for Luka and remake it. And now they have this like idealized version of a small ball group. But the first domino there was getting DFS. And he really, you immediately saw like Rui and LeBron in those small ball groups without DFS versus with DFS. It was just at a different level. So I think DFS, he's beloved by Luka. So I think that's another factor that we have to remember. Like Markieff Morris is remaining on this roster because LeBron and Luka love him. And Luka is going to be the key guy to keep happy moving forward. That I think indicates DFS is going to be staying. Now, in terms of his value, I'd probably put it high teens, low 20s. But could he stay for something like 2 years, 35 million, up to 2 years, 40, 2 years, high 30s, something like that. Maybe three, you want to do three, not unlike, I guess, like Rui's contract, but maybe 351, 354, something like that, mid 50s. But I think he's certainly in that range. And I think even if you want to quibble with that exact, I mean, maybe he gets 360, 3 years, 60 million. I always have to clarify that. I think the price of role players is dropping a little bit with the new CBA and how strict the first apron is. And like, I think teams are trying to save the 20 plus for like high level starters, which it seems like they're using him in a bench role for now. But somewhere in that like 17 to 20 range, I would tentatively say. Like, I don't, maybe he gets more, but I would tentatively kind of pencil him in that range. So like I think he gets a pay bump, but not like a crazy one. Philip M. Brown, thank you for the super chat. Do you think LeBron's groin/foot can stay healthy for 3 playoff rounds to make another finals run? Playoffs are always such a war of attrition. This is a really good question. I don't know. I think the foot's been something he's been dealing with on and off for like so long that I think, I mean, we saw in 2023, LeBron he came back early from the foot injury and was clearly not 100%, but they still got to the conference finals. So maybe he's not quite at peak LeBron or like what peak LeBron has been this season. That's where having Luka and Austin, I think, helps. Like, Austin's a much better player than he was in 2023. Luka's a better offensive player than AD was in 2023. LeBron is honestly like basically this similar player. He's actually a better shooter now. He's been like, you could almost argue he's playing better than he was in 2022-23. Similar, but arguably better, or just right there. And that's crazy. I would say defensively, I think he's been better, like especially with like the past couple months or so. But I think the groin injury would concern me more, because I don't think a groin injury is something you can play through. I think that's one that like kind of just takes you out. I think foot, you can kind of get treatment and like manage it a little bit easier, where groin is like, you really don't want to mess with the groin area and like, kind of the longer term ramifications of that. So that would be the one that would give me more concern. Can he? Yes. Will he? Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball with that. The playoffs are a war of attrition. It is something that he's going to have to manage. That's why I also think it's key that he does not rush the recovery and to make an All-NBA team, to get on the MVP ballot, even for seeding. Like, the Lakers have to be careful with this because it's better to be the 6 seed with a healthy LeBron than the 3 seed with a compromised LeBron, or LeBron who's like a ticking time bomb in terms of getting injured or re-injured. So that would be my thing with that. But can he? I think so. I mean, LeBron he has been obviously accruing more injuries over the last few years just as he ages, but in general, he has a really clean health track record and manages his body as well as anybody. So I think he should be okay. But the groin does scare me a bit. Harry Chinani, have you watched Running Point? Thoughts on the show? I have not. I've heard good things about it. It is on my to watch list, but more obviously the job and this, but Severance, Paradise, Reacher, big Reacher guy, and like there's another one. White Lotus. Yeah. Those are the 4 shows I've been watching weekly with my wife. So I'm actually not caught up on White Lotus. I haven't seen the last one. Paradise, I haven't seen the last 2. So it is hard to keep up in during the season with everything. But Severance, huge Severance guy. Episode 9 was interesting. They're putting a lot in episode 10. Like a lot of pressure for it to answer all these questions. And then White Lotus, I haven't loved this season compared to seasons 1 or 2, but we'll see where it ends up going. King Refill _ Chifa, obviously a high, thank you for the super chat. Obviously, high C is crucial, but I think combo of wide open threes and Hayes, Rui, and Braun come back. Team chemistry, we can beat anybody in the playoffs. Yeah, I agree. I think, again, I mean, I've not swayed on my stance of the Lakers are, in my opinion, the 4th best team in the league and thus have the 4th best odds of winning the championship, which would be behind OKC, Boston, and Cleveland. I think the one thing that concerns me slightly is like the path being slightly harder if they drop to 5 or 6, just because historically teams that win the championship tend to be top 3 seeds. There are exceptions. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is a historic precedent for a reason. It is hard. If the Lakers are the 6th seed, they're almost certainly going to have to win 4 playoff series on the road. Again, it's not impossible. They have LeBron, they have Luka, and they've won some big road games, but there is a reason why that is hard to do in the playoffs, and I don't want to overlook that. At the same time, I think the West is relatively wide open outside of like OKC being the clear best team, in my opinion. And even if the Lakers, like if they somehow get Houston in round 1 and Memphis in round 2, even without home court, I'm picking them in both series. And I think they have a real shot to beat both those teams. So there are paths where it's a little easier in terms of getting to the conference finals. And obviously a much tougher path would be like at Denver than at OKC or something like that, right? So there are ways it's a little easier, ways it's a little harder. But as long as everyone's healthy and they get I would like to see like 7 to 8 games together before the playoffs. They can get that. I think they're in a really good spot to go on a deep run and potentially win it all. Mitch Potter, thank you for the super chat. Can we trade an expiring for space and sign Jax? Well, Lakers have I want to say his early bird rights, so they will be able to pay him. I don't know the exact number yet. I need to do some digging on that. But they can trade dump and help create some not cap space, but some space under the first apron to potentially open up a non-taxpayer MLE, or to just give them some more flexibility with re-signing Jackson, re-signing DFS, LeBron, all that stuff. So I think being smart, like whether Kleba can come back or not and what he looks like if he comes back, I think that's an interesting thing here, that the Lakers are, going to have to weigh, and also obviously his relationship with Luka. But I think that might be like the chip that they need to create some financial flexibility. Aiden Young, thank you for the super chat. Luka's clearly helped Hayes a lot. How much do you think JJ has helped Hayes grow this season? Thank you for responding to my Instagram message too. Goat emoji. What's up, man? Shout out to, I believe, Australia, I want to say. So shout out to Australia, and huge. I think JJ, I would say sometimes the pre-existing relationship helps. And, to go back to Darvin for a second, right? Like his pre-existing relationship with Torian, you saw, like, I think Torian exceeded expectations, all things considered. I don't think he should have been starting. I don't think he should have been playing as much as he was playing, but like he ended up having a certain role within the Lakers and like largely living, again, I think exceeding overall expectations, like at least compared to where he was in like the preseason or like the off season, in part because Darvin really believed in him. And sometimes how much a coach, like I'll always remember Doc Rivers arrives to the Clippers and he tells DeAndre Jordan, I think you're as good as Bill Russell defensively. And like, you're the Bill Russell of our team or whatever. Right. And you saw coming off of Vinny Del Negro, who like kind of similar to Darvin, it was kind of like a Max Christie situation. Obviously JJ helped Max Christie with this too. But it was kind of like the prior coach was very short with the leash, very short with like, you make a mistake, you're out. We're going to go with the veteran option, very similar to Darvin. And then you saw JJ come in uplift Max. Doc came in, uplifted DeAndre. And I think JJ's done the same thing with Jackson here, where he made it clear that he was the backup center from day one. And that even, I think, we'll never know because Christian Wood never got healthy, even though he just tweeted again that he's healthy. And I don't know if he's had every time he's done that, he's had a setback. But JJ made it clear from the beginning, like you could kind of tell with some of his answers that I think even if Christian Wood had come back, I was saying this at if you go back and listen to some of my stuff at the beginning of the season, I was saying like, I think Jackson is going to be the backup center because of the relationship, because of how much JJ trusts him, believes in him. So I think Jackson got off to a good start to the season. He had a little bit of a decline there. Then he got injured, missed around a month, might have been a little bit longer. Then he came back and was really rusty. Remember, like there was Jackson Hayes Coloco conversations going on. And then all of a sudden Jackson just took off and ascended to a different level where like the lineup data started to be better with him compared to AD. And I think there was some noise within that. But then we saw once AD got injured and then traded, they did not miss a beat with Jackson as the starting center, which was pretty wild to see. So I think a big part of that has been JJ and the coaching staff developing him, watching film with him, showing him his short roll reads, and really just unlocking a lot of his skill and like the more cerebral part of his game. And of course, love responding to people on Instagram. And sometimes I miss the messages, and I know I missed a couple of messages recently of people trying to meet up at games, and I profusely apologize. DZ Polo, thank you for the super chat. Too late to say we're sorry and grab C Wood back and let Alex Sled go. Technically not. I don't know if they're going to circle the block though on C Wood. I haven't heard anything in that realm. So I would assume not. I think the more likely thing would be cutting Alex Len and converting Trey Jemison or Christian Coloco. Steve Stevenson, everyone's better post Luka. Nico is insane. I mean, that's been like Jackson got the golden pick and roll partner. Like there might not be a better pick and roll partner for Jackson Hayes in the league than Luka Doncic. Art of War, why did Lakers even sign Len? My theory, I think the Lakers knew about the backup center issue. I think they knew about some of the backlash that they had been getting, and or just like the center depth, I guess. And like even going back like to the offseason, people were upset they didn't make a move throughout the season. It was like, are they going to trade for someone? Are they going to trade for Valanciunas? Are they going to trade for this player, that player? And then they end up making the Luka trade, which everyone's happy about, but it's still kind of like, well, now it's just Jackson Hayes in the middle, and they don't even have like a literal like backup center outside of these two-way guys. So I think Alex Len had a verbal agreement or a tentative agreement with Indiana. I think the Lakers looked at that. They were like, that's a 10+ year veteran. He's 7 foot. He's physical. He's tough. Let's go offer him a roster spot and see if we could get him. And they got him. I think the one issue, like I think ideally they would have signed him to a 10-day and they would have seen he was not the answer and he wouldn't have gotten the second 10-day. The problem is he had a guaranteed offer from Indiana. So just how this works, you're not going to reject a guaranteed offer to sign a 10-day. So if he didn't have the Indiana offer, the Lakers could have initially offered a 10-day, but because he had the guaranteed offer, they could only realistically offer him a guaranteed contract. I think it was a mistake. I mean, again, I had a general sense of Alex Len, but after I went and watched 45 minutes of film, and it was a painful watch. I tried to come on here and share my concerns, and then I think they were quickly validated the second he made his debut against Utah, and really, he's played like a little bit better, but it's not been good, and I don't think he's the answer. So I think it's Jemison or Koloko. Jake from State Farm, if we cut Lennon, we won the chip, would he get one? Yeah, I think he would. I mean, every organization's different, but I think that would be the classy thing to do. JCU, what do you think about Moses Brown, Jovan, Buha? He's one of those guys. I mean, and it's funny that they both played for the Clippers, but like he kind of gives me some Mo Bamba vibes of just like, you would think with the size that he should be better. He should put it together more than he has. I'm not opposed to him, but I think at this point it's just going to be Jemison or Koloko. I don't think Moses Brown moves the needle that much more than either one of those guys, if at all more. So I think at this point we kind of know who it's going to be. Steve Stevenson. This will be the last one just because I went over by 20, of course. But which center in the thank you for the super chat. Which center in the NBA is perfect for Luka? Derek Lively. I think that is really the optimal center for Luka. He's not available, so that's not a realistic. I think among potentially realistic guys, I think Nick Claxton is a really good fit because of like Nick Claxton to me is basically not the same as Jackson. That there are some similarities. There are some clear differences as well, but like he is a switchable, mobile defensive big who I think would fit into their defensive identity, and then offensively similarly can be a lob threat and a high percentage finisher. I think the bigger appeal with Claxton is just the defensive side. And this year his metrics have been elite. He's rated out as like an A in a lot of metrics, including post defense, which like looking at his size, like 6'9", 6'10", he's kind of slight. You wouldn't expect him to be as good of a post defender as he is, but at least the numbers indicate he is. So I think he's not as big as Jackson. I think the catch radius is probably not like Jackson's a freak, and like that's his like most elite NBA skill is just that catch radius and how he makes it look easy, but it's very difficult. But I think there's like a major upgrade defensively overall in terms of like, I mean, Claxton's one of the best defensive bigs in the league, and he's got this Swiss Army knife defensive capability. Now, the one thing is like, is it worth the price of, I mean, if it's Gabe, Kleba, Dalton, and a pick, maybe. If it's Rui and Gabe, Rui and Kleba and Dalton and a pick, like now you're taking a big chunk of the rotation, the identity. That's a tougher one to kind of, think about. But I would say Derek Lively, I think is like a lab grown big because he could basically do what Jackson does offensively, but is also a switchable good big and also a good rim protector and defensive rebounder. But Claxton is probably the one that's like the most realistic in terms of a guy that the Lakers could get that would check those boxes. Pablo says Jokic should be good next to Luka. Sure. I mean, we could throw Jokic, Wemby, Jokic, Luka together would be insane. J Note says, do we still want to trade Gabe? I think it just depends on the deal. Like you have to trade. I think the one thing I always say is like, you have to trade something to get something back. And I don't think Maxi Kleba and a pick is like really getting you something crazy back. So and even Gabe, I think people would look at him a little bit more as like an expiring contract. He probably has more value to the Lakers still than other teams. But yeah, but I'm going to end here before I keep going. But I appreciate you all. Shout out to the late night gang. We're ending right before midnight. So I still think that this qualifies as late night. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of Buha's Block with Trevor Lane of Lakers Nation. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to touch on the last couple games, preview Denver, Milwaukee, talk about Jackson, talk about Jordan Goodwin, talk about Luka, Austin, all that stuff, everything relevant going on with the Lakers. So that should be a fun one tomorrow. And shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to you all in the chat. I appreciate you. Wherever you are in the world, have a good day, good night, good next 24 hours and beyond. Appreciate you all, and I will talk to you all very soon.